topic number 3. Brett Ratner did probably one of the most well-known X-Men movies of all time, The Last Stand, which actually wouldn't be that far off from being, even if it wasn't satiric, a little accurate, because it's probably the least loved movie out there. Not a terrible movie.
It was awful.
I was trying to be nice. I didn't like it at all.
Yeah.
I was even ticked at some of the stuff they did, but I was dancing around it a little bit. Go ahead. What do you think, Matt?
Okay, so before we move any further, okay, so you have X2, which Bryan Singer at the time, that was the best superhero movie, comic book movie that they'd probably ever made. Because they took those comic book elements out of them from one and gave them regular haircuts, gave them regular clothes, and put them in a situation where you cared a little bit about it.
Right.
You had Nightcrawler in there. You had a really good mix of them, but you had a great story that went with it, and a great ending with the Phoenix under the water. Mm-hmm. Well, then he comes and takes over and just shits all over everything.
Yeah.
Even the lighting in that movie sucked.
Mm-hmm.
It was way too bright.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was a horrible movie.
I was so excited to see the Phoenix in the third one, and then the way it was done, I was like, God.
It's a
damn it.
Squandered storyline.
Yeah.
And this, all of a sudden, mutants are a certain level. This is level 4. He's a level 5. If you would have ingratiated that the whole time, and I'm not saying you can't add new elements, it was just this, all of a sudden, everybody knew what level 4 and level 3 and level 5 and all this stuff was, where I'm just like, that's a little silly, but okay, that's a gimme. You can let that go. But yeah, the way it was done, and I think that was one of the biggest aspects where you're like, okay, so Professor, dead. Everything's gone, and then the Phoenix is just this terrible, awful. You didn't even get to have the good element of the Phoenix before the Dark Phoenix. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like they skipped over all that kind of stuff, and it just didn't even feel the same. And I know it's a different director, but it didn't feel the same at all. So I completely agree with you. Derailed the series. How about you?
Yeah.
Anyway, that wasn't actually this topic, but
we had
to get that out. Brett Ratner has gone on record by saying that he thinks that Rotten Tomatoes is the worst thing ever to happen to Hollywood. His quote is,
apart from X3.
Now,
it's in quotation.
Now, he is a talented director. He's made a lot of other great stuff. A lot of people do not like at all what he did with the third X-Men movie. His actual quote is, I think it's the destruction of our business, is according to Entertainment Weekly. I think it's the destruction of our business. I have such respect and admiration for film criticism, which is okay, whatever. When I was growing up, film criticism was a real art, and there was intellect that went into that. And you would read Pauline Kael's reviews or some others, and that doesn't exist anymore. Now it's about a number, a compounded number of how many positives versus negatives. Now it's about what's your Rotten Tomatoes score, and that's sad because the Rotten Tomatoes score was so low on Batman v Superman, I think it put a cloud over the movie that was incredibly successful. Who wants to tackle this? From which angle? Because...
Well, first off,
I need to make sure I've got enough room to record all this.
Yeah.
Oh, my God, yeah.
I can start with just the analytical piece of this, and that is Rotten Tomatoes does what it does very well. Uh-huh. It captures actual reviews from actual media outlets, real, essentially journalism. It also captures reviews from just
fake
the common
news.
Yeah.
as we've been known to call
fake
it now.
news from actual people that put up in exactly what they mean and the number that they feel is right, but it's fake.
Yeah, and the same thing, but they also do it. They also include measurements, I'll call them, from just regular moviegoers. It's not just an elitist group of people reviewing these. It's also the common folk is what I'll call. But the thing to remember is that you can be frustrated with that, but Rotten Tomatoes has never made or break a movie that I was going to watch.
Right.
It's a nice little supplement to kind of get maybe a flavor for what other people would think of the film, but to go so far as to kind of say it's the worst thing that's happened to film is just blowing it so far out of proportion.
Right.
Listen, people are going to quantify in some way or form how good or how bad a movie is. Now,
or a video game, or a book, or a TV show.
And it's always going to be arbitrary,
right?
Regardless of how, even though, he's reflecting on days, of in the past of professional reviewers, Siskel and Ebert. Let's look at people that just they're connoisseurs of film. It's like, listen, this kind of concept has always been around. The fact that now you're getting either a red tomato or a green splotch, that's not the issue. All right, that's not a problem. That's essentially all you're doing is you're taking that same data and you're just showing it in a different way. And you're saying you don't like it because that number you don't think is right. Well, you're not going to think the reviews are going to be right.
Right.
So the fact that you're essentially blaming this website for being, okay, well, this is hurting film. No, it's not hurting film.
To me, it's just complaining.
Exactly. It's all it is just this is one place that one person can go to and check a score. If nobody is putting that much credence into the website where it's going to define or hurt which movies are going to be made or how they're going to be made.
Matt, what do you think?
I don't have a problem with it. I mean, what Dan's saying is 100% right. It's somebody complaining about something. He got a low score. He blamed it on Rotten Tomatoes instead of fessing up the fact that maybe it wasn't as good of a movie as he thought it was going to be or told people it was going to be. Mm-hmm. I mean, it happens in everyday life. We have successes and we have failures. But the thing is to kind of blast it out there and blame Rotten Tomatoes for your lack of success is ridiculous.
Yep.
Okay. And I don't base my movie-going decisions on Rotten Tomatoes. I almost laugh at it when it's...
How many people, honestly...
Though. It's like, this is a perfect Rotten Tomatoes score. And I'm like, still not going to see it.
Honestly, when is the last time you had a conversation with anyone you know that were going to go out to the movie theaters and before you went there, you said, well, what's the Rotten Tomatoes score? I can think of 0 times that has ever come up in any conversation I was going to go see something. Ever. Have you guys ever had that occur to you?
No.
No, not at all. But it's one of those things. It's a crutch. Mm-hmm. He's going to carry it around. Now, if we found out later on that Rotten Tomatoes was getting money from studios to give them favorable reviews, then clearly ethically that's wrong.
Sure.
What it does allow is a larger sample size.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I remember going and seeing Gangs of New York based on a review in the Des Moines Register. Mm-hmm. It got 5 stars. I went and saw that. I hated that movie. It fucking sucked.
You're wrong, by the way, but continue.
Yeah, that's fine. I've gone back and watched it again. A little more tolerable. But the fact that I chose that over something else based on a review, I just don't look at them anymore.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm. It's not something. And then the older times, I remember Siskel and Ebert, and I remember watching all those things. And you're right in some way. Like if that film noir aspect of it, the visuals, you can find a particular critic and follow them. I mean, you don't have to use Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
It's just an aggregator.
I think it's just, yeah. That's it. It's all the numbers together, and here's what you get.
It's interesting because, especially when people compare it back to like the critics of old that we grow up with, where there was only a handful that you had access to. Siskel and Ebert, probably the best known, and then something that was in your local paper, your local news program, or whatever it was. The internet has really democratized and allowed every single person on the planet's their opinion on something to have in some sense an equal weight because it's easily accessible and easily available. So I'm sure that Rotten Tomatoes, if it would have even existed, which I don't know how it would back in those days, would encompass, I don't know, maybe all the newspaper reviewers and then some of the high prominent ones. I don't know how that would even work. But today when you can have thousands of people's reviews and put it up there, I can understand if someone's frustrated with boiling everything that you do and you put your heart, sweat, and tears into a basic number. I can understand how that would be frustrating, but it's just kind of the nature of evolution of how stuff has come to be. So complaining about it's kind of it's like I remember before there was all this Twitter and people were talking all the time. It was, okay, well, this is the way it is. So complain all you want, but it's not going anywhere, you know? Mm-hmm. And I agree. All reviews are subjective. Everyone has completely different reviews. There's some movies that have gotten terrible scores on Rotten Tomatoes that I love. Maybe it's an Adam Sandler movie or Anchorman. I can't imagine that has a huge Rotten Tomatoes score, right? Mm-hmm. Fucking love that movie. Yeah. So the fact that these are all subjective, I think that the only thing that really comes down to is if you want to follow an individual person that you come to find that you and their tastes align, then you know who to follow. Other than that, any review you read, unless they're descriptive about why they liked it or why they didn't, they're almost pointless. You know, I mean, it really look how divided Batman v Superman was, that he even talks about this. Some people love that movie. And it was really polarized. There was some people that just thought it was okay. I completely understand why it wouldn't be classified as a good movie, or people would get lost in it. I still enjoyed myself. I still came out of there liking it. I have no idea how I would quantify that in a number. But all this stuff is subjective, and when you have an aggregation system that's not just a handful of people's opinions, if you're really looking for basing whether you're going to see a certain movie, whether it's at home or in a movie theater, off of a review, and you're just taking it by an aggregated number, you're an idiot. I mean, if you really are going to base whether you go based off of number, in my opinion, find a reviewer that you have similar viewpoints to that you actually like, because otherwise you could go in there completely blind. I mean, that number could mean nothing necessarily. You might absolutely love a movie that was despised with the aggregation system, or a movie that was super highly praised and you had absolutely no interest in it whatsoever. I mean, unless the review of the person that gave it agrees with your viewpoints, isn't it kind of make the review moot? You know, it's like, what's the point? Sure.
Yeah.
I just think that this is funny that he said that, and I'm like, I kind of understand a little bit why someone in his position might say that, because if you do put your blood, sweat, and tears into a movie for a couple of years and people boil it down to a number, I can understand how that would sting a little bit. But to me, this is a very childish reaction.
And everyone's going to look at X3 and like, this is sour grapes. Yeah. That's all it is. And you're right. I mean, his role as a producer means that this is something that's very visible to him. But the degree... The weight that he's associating with Rotten Tomatoes is
the worst thing to happen to Hollywood.
Well, it's not even bad.
Right.
It's so far overblown where you're just taking just basic data analytics.
Yeah.
That's all you're doing. Now you can, there's maybe elements that you can question as far as how they're doing their modeling or how they're, pulling their sample or something like that. But that in the end of the day, that's not much of an argument.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like you really don't have much to stand on here. You're saying that something that isn't that impactful is the worst thing in the world right now, and it's having such a negative impact on everything. Like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. If I knew a lot of people that were constantly talking about Rotten Tomatoes, I might give this even a somewhat validity, even then only to a point. But I don't know a single person that has ever talked about the Rotten Tomatoes score before we go see a movie, ever, at all. So,
and even then, if you're looking at the movie industry itself, Rotten Tomatoes, I mean, that's after the fact something's in production. What about the other periodicals like Variety? What about any other, that industry media, which is going to have a lot more weight, it's going to have a lot more influence on what's actually going on in Hollywood, what projects are being picked, who's being picked to direct, produce, write, whatever.
Right.
So this is such a drop in the bucket that it honest to God, it almost doesn't merit discussion.
Yeah. I completely agree with that, and yet here we are. Yeah. Well, we're talking about why you shouldn't have to talk about this.
Yeah.
So listen to what we have to say, and then after that, make sure other people don't. Okay? So, cool. Any other final thoughts, guys?
I do like Rush Hour. So,
yeah.
So
dude, he's a good director. Like any of us could throw a stone.
Rush Hour 1?
Huh?
Yes.
He did 1 and 2, I think.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he did.
He did 1 and 2.
The franchise.
Yeah.
So.
Is it a shared universe?
It's
Sorry.
Way to have that bolt in the chamber. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, let us know what you think. Is Rotten Tomatoes the worst thing to happen to Hollywood ever? Do you agree with that? Let us know what you think in the comments below.